Welcome back everybody, High Tech Lab here. Today I want to show you guys the trench that I did. Now this was started by my solar reconfiguration project, but this doesn't really fall into the video category of my solar reconfiguration. I ran some pipes in here as part of that project, but ultimately this is part of my water system upgrade, and there's a lot going on here, so let's get started. In this trench, I have 5 pipes. I have a 2-inch PVC conduit for electrical, and this is all going to the location where we're going to have a metal building built on the hill one day. The 2-inch pipe is going to have in it, for now, 5 number 6 wires. It'll have 2 blacks, 2 reds, a green ground, and the purpose for that for now is going to be bringing power from my solar array that I'm moving out into the field back into my electrical room. The 1-inch electrical conduit in this trench is going to be used for data communications to our metal building. For now, that's going to be capped off. I then have a 2-inch water pipe that is fed from our off-grid water system, which I'll show you guys here in a minute. And then I have a 1-inch pipe which is coming up the hill from our well, and that is going to be all of the water coming from the well, and it's going to feed up into our storage tanks here on the top of the hill. And then I have an 1.25 inch poly pipe that goes to our septic. I'll talk about that more in a future video, but these 5 pipes are in this trench. I started out about 3 feet deep and go as deep as 6.5 feet toward the end. Let me show you more of this. So here in the middle of the trench, I have a stub up out of my 2-inch pipe with a sprinkler control box over it. Has a ball valve and a 2-inch cam lock, and this is pressurized by our off-grid water system, and this is going to allow us to possibly hook on sprinklers, garden hoses, fire hoses, whatever you may need here on the top of the hill. This is a convenient location to get water. Continuing down the trench toward our metal building, we have a lot more going on. Now this is an extremely tough shot to get because I'm shooting down into the trench, but bear with me here. What I have with the black pipe, that's the pipe that goes down the field all the way out to our septic system. And tied into there I have the 1.25 inch poly, and this is going to be temporary. I have gray water from our washing machine and dryer in the utility room, and previously we were letting it run out and water the field. We have our septic system here on the top of the hill, and I didn't feel like that was getting very much water other than the black water we dump out of our RVs. So now that gray water goes into the septic system and helps keep that healthy. I then have coming up a 2-inch vent pipe, so as the pump feeds into the septic system, which I'll show you here in a second, it has a way to get an air gap so it can properly drain. This is not exactly perfectly to code, but like I said, this is going to be replaced when we build our metal building. And then I did kind of plan ahead for the future. It may be tough to see, but there's a stub out the back of that cleanout where we can connect on future piping. And then below I have a 2-inch water line, and that's just coming here to a ball valve. This is going to feed the water to the metal building when we get there. And for now I just have a spigot on it, and I'm going to continue the trench down the hill. I have that ripped, and right now there's a 1-inch PVC pipe coming up from our well. I ran that pipe in a previous video. If you haven't seen my 1,400 foot water pipe coming up the hill, feel free to click on the card in the top corner. And like I said, the 2-inch pipe is going to be continued. The 1-inch pipe is going to be continued later on. But for now, it's on the top of the hill. This is just my stopping point. And then over here, I have a post. This is not all set in stone, but this is where my 1-inch conduit and my 2-inch conduit ends. I'm going to show what I'm going to do with those electrical conduits in the Solar Reconfiguration Part 3 video, which I'll be uploading shortly. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to see that video, and when it is up, I'll put a card in the top right corner. So back over here at the other end of the trench, I needed to fill some of it in already, but there's not much to see, just some 90s and stuff. So over here I have my 1-inch pipe coming up in the back, and that's the water coming up from the well. I can open a ball valve right here and send that water through another piece of 1.25 inch black poly, and that goes over to a tank I have in Mom's garden, and that's going to be the purge water, or in other words the flush water, because when we start our well we have a lot of water that is contaminated, not like contaminated in a way where it has pathogens in it, but it has a lot of iron, and it really isn't good for like washing dishes and stuff because it can stain stuff. So we send that water over to Mom's garden, and she waters her plants with it, and they don't really mind. So once the well is flushed out, we can close this ball valve, and the water comes out and goes that way to the water tanks. And I'm still going to need to get into more detail here shortly, but that's essentially where the well water goes. I then have my 2-inch pipe for power and my 1-inch pipe for data communications. And I'm going to not talk about the electrical in this video. I'll do that in the part 3 solar reconfiguration video. It'll be pretty good video. You guys will like it, I'm sure. And then over here short term, I have my pumping station. There is a sump pump with a float switch in this Ace bucket with a really cool lid that just unscrews, and that sends water through the 1.25-inch poly pipe in the ground back to the septic system. And this poly here in the back, this is coming from the washers that feeds the gray water into this bucket, and it just plugs in and sends that water back into the septic system. And then lastly, I have this 2-inch pipe that comes out of the trench and goes into my pump room. Let me get you guys a look of that. So first things first, here are the water tanks. These are 2,500 gallon water tanks, and the water feeds out through these pipes and goes back into the pump room. And then this is the output pipe going up to the water tanks. Let me go in the pump room so you guys better understand the flow of water, but I need to start out showing here, this is where the water comes out of the tanks. So this is our pump room. Now this is set up pretty nice. We have some storage in here for some water pumps and pressure washers. I'm gonna get a little bit of stuff out of the way and give you a greater detail on this. So sorry about the noise, somebody's showering, otherwise I would gladly turn these pumps off, but I don't think they would like that if I turn them off for the sake of making the video. So I'll try and talk a little bit louder and hopefully you can understand. The water comes in from the tanks through this 2-inch pipe right here and goes into the pumps. Now I have 3 of these pumps. These are from Harbor Freight, and they actually work quite well despite being cheap, and they're 160 bucks a piece, so it's really economical for us to use these. Now I did have an issue with the threads leaking on them, so I welded on a stainless steel nipple, and that nipple had really nice threads on it, so I didn't have to worry about leaks anymore. So even though they were built a little cheap, they work out quite well, and they actually are pretty strong pumps with a 2.5 gallon pressurization tank on the bottom. Now these pumps are manifolded together with the 2-inch PVC pipe, and I have provisions here on the end where I can easily add on a 4th pump. Now these pumps are good for 16 gallons per minute, and I was looking at some charts, and what I could determine is that 2-inch pipe can run about 48 gallons per minute. So the cool thing is, with 4 pumps, I should be easily able to have full pressure and full flow on this 4-inch pipe. So that's going to be pretty nice because these pressure switches are set to kick in stages. So most of the time we'll only run 1 pump, but if there's a high demand for water, the 2nd pump, 3rd pump, and then eventually 4th pump can all kick in and provide that needed water. So if there's a fire, we can easily run a 2-inch fire hose off this setup and be able to protect our land. Coming up out of these pumps, I have a pressure switch here, and this doesn't run the pumps under normal operation, but that's actually a low pressure cutout. So if the pressure drops below 15 to 20 psi, it's going to shut these pumps off, so that way if we run out of water, it's not going to burn up the pumps. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this because if you have a sudden surge and the pumps can't catch up and the pressure drops, there's the potential that it can shut off the water when you need it most. But one day I want to rebuild this system electrically a little bit different and use a PLC and some relays to control when these pumps kick in and out. I then have a 1-inch piece teeing off, going through some filters. Now these are just standard whole house filters. They run a 10-inch cartridge. You can get these at Home Depot, Lowe's, just about any home improvement store. And then I have a ball valve over here. Eventually I will send that so that it can run the water back into the tanks. A few different thoughts there. I'm going to do that later on, not to get too confusing. And then I still need to cut in another T with a 1-inch spigot, and that's going to send water to Mom's garden. So if her 1,500 gallon tank of purge water is empty, she can also use the 5,000 gallons we have stored in these tanks, because you don't want to know what happens when Mom runs out of water. The world freezes over. And then over here in the corner I have a pipe that runs down. That's the pipe that runs out into the trench. and will eventually run down the hill all the way into the meadow. Now we're starting with about 60 psi here on the top of the hill. By the time you go down the 100 feet to the meadow, you have about 110 psi. So it certainly is going to be interesting to see, with whatever we put in the well that uses water, how I'm going to need to figure out how to regulate that down, especially on a 2-inch line. It'll definitely take some ingenuity to figure that out. And then over here on the other side of the room, I have a pool pump and a 200 square foot filter. The filter was purchased on Amazon. It's been working quite well. I'll put a link in the description for this if you're interested. It's good for the full flow of this pump because it's designed to run in a pool application. And this is great because I can use it to circulate the water in my 5,000 gallons of storage here at the top, so that we don't have any contamination in there, and can make sure it's nice and clean water for use in showers, washing clothes, dishes, that kind of thing. And then there's a 1-inch pipe sneaking down here, and that's the water coming up from the well. And that actually runs through the pool filter as well on its way into the tanks. And then I have a couple of spigots over here on the front of the room, and that has a 2-inch cam lock that I can take water out. So this works extremely well for being a nice transfer station where I can transfer water in and out of the pump room. And then I have a valve down here, and that's just the drain on the filter, so you can drain all the water out without flooding the room when you need to clean the filter. It works out quite well because I have a 3-way switch here set up to go low and high for that pool pump because it's a variable speed, and then a double pole switch to turn it on and off and low and high and all that jazz. And then finally I have this pump room set up with its own sub panel and some conduit runs in between, and it's nice and wired up, fed off the off-grid power supply. If you're new to the channel and haven't seen my off-grid power supply, click on the link in the card in the top corner. It's actually pretty sweet. But either way, that's kind of my off-grid water setup for now. I'm sure this is going to change quite a bit, but for the time being, it's functioning quite well. I'm extremely pleased with it. If you have any questions or comments, or want to talk about how I'm a terrible plumber, leave it in the comments below. If you found this video cool, share it with your friends on Facebook. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. Bye now.